YouTube. Looks like we are streaming on YouTube now as well. Okay, good. So everything is working, I think. Microphone is working. TikTok's working. Hello, guys. And ready to start studying Luke chapter 21, which is going to be a very interesting chapter because it deals with all of those questions of the end time warnings. So I am this may go quite long because it's definitely in my wheelhouse to be talking about the end times. For those of you who aren't familiar with me here on TikTok, I am the author of the book Maybe Everyone is Wrong: Revelations, Conspiracy, and the Kingdom of Heaven. This entire book is about end time prophecy and how it fits together, how we can see it unfolding in history leading up to today. And so this study is going to absolutely get into the same subject that I wrote a book on. And I'm very interested to talk about. I think it's more relevant than ever as we get closer and closer to the tribulation and the rise of the green world order, as I call it, and all these fascinating end times questions. Jesus is going to teach us about it, and we get to read from Luke chapter 21. Today I'm going to be reading from the Majority Standard Bible. Sometimes I like to read different translations. This one, anything that's a majority text, is basically a way of saying that they've taken all these different manuscripts, the Greek manuscripts for the book of Luke, which there were many, many copies made of, right? So we have lots of fragments of different copies of the thousands of years old copies of the Gospel of Luke. And instead of picking one of them to translate from or whatever, it simply takes what the majority of those manuscripts have in common, the most common feature of all of them when the sentence is written, and it uses the majority as the basis for their translation. That might not be interesting to people who aren't nerds, but for me, I like the idea that there's a translation out there that kind of takes a bunch of these manuscripts. There's, I don't know how many manuscripts there are copies of Luke specifically, but I'm sure there's hundreds of them. And it just takes the majority of those manuscripts and uses that as the basis for a translation. So let's see how that works. I think it usually goes pretty well. Debbie and everyone else, thank you for joining in and for saying hi. I'm going to start reading, and then I'll get to some comments as we go. Verse 1, Then Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. Truly, I tell you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. For they all contributed to God out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on. This is just a simple teaching, a nice one, that shows that God considers your circumstance, not just a measurable output, but the source that it's coming from. It's a nice way of reminding us that even if you don't have much to offer God, He loves and cares about everything that you do for Him, even if it's small, even if it's smaller than what everyone else is doing. That's a reason to never be discouraged and to think it doesn't matter if you have very limited capacity or free time or whatever. If you're somehow serving the kingdom, and apparently, in this case, if it actually costs you something, which nowadays, with how busy everything is, time is one of our most valuable resources, more than just money. If you give some time to God, I believe that He will value that, and He is not ignorant of your circumstances. So make sure you're still doing it, even if you can only do a little bit. Melissa says hi. And on YouTube, Persian Drum says, please pray for the brethren in the state of Israel. There's a law being proposed there to ban the preaching of the gospel under the pain of imprisonment. The satanic persecution is going to spread. I'm going to quickly look that up because I remember either you or somebody else mentioning it. Ban gospel. There is a news story from Premier Christian News. Let's see what the source is that they're going to link to here. I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing the link to the source for this. Let me try to get somewhere else. Israeli PM moves to stop proposed law banning the gospel in the Holy Land. That was today on vision.org. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ruled out approving a proposed law that would have made it illegal to mention the gospel in the Jewish state. We will not advance any law against the Christian community, he said in a tweet. He was responding to a move by two senior members of Israel's parliament, known as the Knesset, to introduce a bill that would outlaw telling people about Jesus in Israel and jail everyone who does. All Israel News reported that the bill could have created a major headache for Mr. Netanyahu's government by upsetting 60 million evangelical Christians in the U.S. and hundreds of millions more around the world who are among the biggest supporters of the state of Israel. Editor-in-chief, evangelical leader, and best-selling author Joel Rosenberg wrote that the U.S. lawmakers have always stood with the Jewish state and were likely to fiercely oppose efforts to silence the followers of Jesus in the Holy Land. Let's see what else. What does it say here? The proposed legislation would have outlawed all efforts by people of one faith who in any way want to discuss or try to persuade people of other faiths to consider changing their current religious beliefs. The punishment for doing so would be 1 year imprisonment if with an adult, but 2 years if with someone under 18. So it would be extra illegal to teach kids or teenagers about Jesus. This bill would apply to people having spiritual conversations with Israelis of any religion. The authors of the legislation, Moshe Gafni and Yaakov Asher, are ultra-Orthodox Jewish members of the Knesset. Both are influential voices and important votes inside the 64-seat governing coalition led by Mr. Netanyahu. That is crazy that it was actually that blatant, although I totally believe that Netanyahu will shut it down, and then they would know that President, whatever, Prime Minister Netanyahu would shut it down, and so they're doing it kind of as a stunt. So Mr. Gaffney now concedes that it won't be taken any further. He said in a statement, the mission bill was introduced as in every beginning of the Knesset and not promoted at this stage, so dealing with it now is not relevant. But yeah, I guess we should pray about that. Even though it might be dead in the water as far as this bill goes, that doesn't mean it won't be done later. And any country that wants to punish Christians specifically for that is going to get a similar level of hate. But for it to be done in Israel or proposed in Israel is particularly amusing, considering evangelical Christians are the biggest supporters of the Israelis in the world. And Netanyahu knows that very well. So, of course, he doesn't want that to be passed. But he also can't come out and say, you know, we love Jesus or anything like that. So, and not that he would, because they don't, but they don't want to piss off Christians quite that much just yet. So, interesting. Parameter says, good evening. He's throwing up some salt shakers. Good to see that. Parameter says, truly incredible watching the cogs of prophecy in motion. What a time to be alive. Praise God. Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, you can pray about it, and I do think that we should pray for peace and for understanding and for safety for Christians, while also knowing fully that prophecy has to be fulfilled and that the whole nation, the whole world will hate us. By the way, that is exactly what we're going to read about today in Luke chapter 21. So let's continue our study here. Kendra says hello. Good to see you in the chat there, Kendra. Kendra says they are trying to pass a similar bill in California as well, I heard. Jane says, oh, I like that you sourced this live. Thank you. If you mean that I actually looked up the source of the news story, I like to do that sometimes, yeah. It's on YouTube. I actually have the browser pulled up so you can see it for yourself and read along with me, but all right. So the Luke chapter 21 starts with this widow who puts in a little bit, and then Jesus says God considers that to be more than what the rich people put in, because she only had a little bit, and she's putting in everything she had to live on, is what he says. Now, this gets to the juicy part in verse 5. As some of the disciples were remarking how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and consecrated gifts, Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Teacher, they asked, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to take place? Jesus answered, see to it that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming, I am he, and the time is near. Therefore, do not follow them. When you hear of wars and rebellions, do not be alarmed. These things must happen first, but the end is not imminent. So, of course, Jesus doesn't even know when the timing of this is going to be. He will say, I believe in this chapter even, or in other chapters, he says that only the Father knows the time. But he's saying lots of people are going to make predictions. Don't follow them. When you hear of wars and rebellions, do not be alarmed. So one of the signs of a Christian, a mature Christian, is that they don't get alarmed when they hear about wars and rebellions. And I know that in my book, maybe everyone is wrong. I speculate that somewhere around 2030 might be when Jesus comes back, and that in the time between now and then, there could be this attempt to depopulate the planet and kill the Christians and all these things, wars and famines and the rise of the Green Rider of Revelation. But I admit that that's speculation, and that's important. I'm not telling you, first of all, he says people coming in his name saying, I am he. I'm not doing that. Or saying the time is near. I'm not saying the time is near. The reason why it's called Maybe Everyone is Wrong is that I have a hypothesis about how that could happen and what it would look like if it was happening. And it's just a very humble attempt to explain the idea. I don't say that it's true. I don't claim to be a prophet. God did not reveal the truth to me. I could be completely wrong about the timeline. So that's one of the things that some people think you shouldn't even talk about, the possibility of it happening in our lifetimes. because, we don't know the time, but I don't claim to know the time. I am just looking at evidence and keeping an open mind. And I want people to consider that most interpretations are pretty bad. But definitely, either way, I'm not alarmed about wars and rebellions. But he says that even if they do happen, the end is not imminent. So, even if there was a war and things were getting crazy, like let's say the World War I and II, you would have thought that's the end. That's the big destruction. And then Jesus is going to come back. But it's now 100 years later, and those people were wrong who would have said that. Every century, every turn of the century, people talk about how, the year 2000 or the year 1000 or the year 1900 or 1800, 1700. They always have these landmarks where they think the end is going to come, and, obviously they've been wrong. So you can't just go along with it. But I think that it's good to consider the signs that we are in, like the rise of the green agenda, the rise of the green world order. And so I try to connect it up with historical events using all of this hindsight that we have and the internet to help us study history. And, as you guys who are fans of my book know, I do a pretty good job of laying out the different colors of the riders and how it leads up to where we are today. And the big message is to not be afraid that prophecy has to happen. So he's warning about people who are fear-mongering, and I'm trying to do the opposite of that. Catchild says, I agree with what you have spoken about in your book, the timeline. And Jane says, if America would turn back to prayer and repentance, maybe we will have more time. I've never really thought that that's a way that it works. I tend to go more in the direction that the timeline is already set in stone and that we can't really change the timing of anything. But, you might be right. In the Old Testament, I believe that was more how it worked. And, maybe the time is past by now, and maybe it's too late right now. The Bible compares it to a woman who's pregnant, and that there's certain things that have to happen. It also compares it to a crop that is maturing in the field. It's not ready to harvest yet. And so there are these metaphors of a very slow process that makes you very impatient. Farmers get very impatient. Moms get very impatient when they're pregnant and they're waiting for the baby and stuff. So this impatience is natural, and it's not necessarily bad. There's supposed to be this huge anticipation of what's going to happen. And Jesus is trying to prepare the very first people who are hearing about this, his followers, for the amount of time it's going to take. Of course, they don't realize they're all going to be long dead by the time any of this stuff happens. And we don't even know if Jesus was aware of how long it would take. It doesn't seem like he does know. So here's what he says, in verse 10. He goes on to explain these end time warnings. He told them, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and even pestilences in various places, along with fearful signs and great signs from heaven. Now, we, as modern people, don't particularly go crazy over blood moons and eclipses and northern lights and stuff like that. We kind of have just the scientific understanding of it. I think the great signs from heaven might be stuff like that. Like not heaven as in a spiritual event happening that, makes us all, it's a miracle. It would be what we consider an astronomical event. I wonder if that's what he means when he says great signs from heaven. But yeah, he says there has to be fearful sights, great signs from heaven, famine, pestilence, earthquakes, wars, nations rising against nations. Now looking back at it, 2,000 years later, it's like, of course, Rome was this huge empire, and then there was the Mongols, and there's the, you know, European powers, and we just sort of understand it very naturally. But from their point of view, before all that stuff happens, that's crazy. That's crazy to think about how much the world is going to proceed and how much famine and destruction and earthquakes and things there will be, because those were all tied in with sort of a supernatural worldview, a worldview that God is controlling these events in the world, the natural disasters as we call them. Those are signs from God. But as it happens more and more in cycles and in different ways, we sort of look at it now as being just normal. But Jesus is warning them and future Christians to not get so worked up about each of these things. And I think, therefore, we are actually we have a better perspective as modern day Christians to not get so crazy about a famine or an earthquake, although people still message me about the earthquakes in Turkey and in different places, like this is the sign of the end, when Jesus actually says the opposite, that there's going to be these things and it doesn't mean that it's the end. And they will get worse, right? And so I think we are getting to the worst of these things, the worst signs of the end. And I talk about why this particular age that we're in, the green world order, as I call it, is going to be about depopulation. It's going to be about famine, artificial weather control, and wars, different ways of diseasing and infecting the population to try to kill off a lot of people, because that's what the green rider of Revelation does. It's ridden by death. In Revelation chapter 6, you can read about the 4 horsemen. The fourth one is all about death, depopulating the world in these different ways. And I think we're approaching that right now. I think we're starting to see it really come into power, come into focus. That's my theory. And so if that's true, then 25% of the world is going to be killed. Not 100%, not 75%, but 25%, which is billions of people. It's a lot of people. But even that is not the end yet. That's just that's just the start of this next phase of focus, the world focus sort of shifting back over to Israel and the 144,000, as Revelation talks about the 144,000, right at the same time that there's all these martyrs in heaven. And so I think the church gets killed, prophecy shifts over back to Israel, and then a lot more still has to play out. The Revelation is a very long and interesting story. The point of no return here on TikTok leaves a comment saying, "What a slow burn. The rider needs to gallop." Well, that's the sense that we all get, I think, when you start to think about the length of all of these things. But because it's compared to a pregnancy or a crop that's growing, it always takes longer than you want. We have very short lifespans, and we're stuck in this massive drama that's unfolding. And the important thing is that we do our part during that to reassure each other, to keep spreading the gospel, not just the gospel of the forgiveness of sins, but the gospel of the kingdom, which nobody seems to talk about. So here's what he says. Before all of this, because he's talking about major signs, but he says before all of this, they will seize you and persecute you. On account of my name, they will deliver you to the synagogues and prisons. Notice that synagogues is one of the things listed. Now, that was true in the first century already. That was true in Jerusalem at the time the 12 disciples were still alive. So that could have been already fulfilled thousands of years ago. But imagine if that's still true towards the end, before these great signs and wonders happen. Synagogues, this whole concern about the Noahide laws, as Persian Drum pointed out, the proposed bill in Israel to ban and arrest people who spread the gospel, that would be a very, very direct continuation of what was happening in the first century. And it would be true when Jesus says, on account of my name, they will deliver you to the synagogues. Not just regular prison, but synagogues will be like a prison or a place where you get judged. And so they will deliver you to synagogues and prisons. In verse 12, he says, and they will bring you before kings and governors. Now, there's not a lot of kings left, but we understand this to mean prime ministers and, governors. It says governors here. Those are still the title people use. So different authorities. They will bring you before the worldly, secular authorities. It says in verse 13, they will be your opportunity to serve as witnesses. So you see, serving as a witness is actually a good thing. Being locked up here is a good thing. Going to the prison and the synagogue and being hated, being persecuted is all good because it's an opportunity to serve as a witness. Don't be a coward when that happens. So, make up your mind. He says in verse 14, this is what Jesus says. Make up your mind not to worry beforehand how to defend yourselves. For I will give you speech and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to contradict or resist. Now, this again, I'm probably going to mention this every single stream now that I think about it, but the Martyr's Mirror is one of the most precious treasure books in the entire history of the world. It's basically second only to the Bible. The Martyr's Mirror is a record of martyrs who were doing exactly what Jesus says here. They were being persecuted. They were being sent to prison. They were being brought before governors. A lot of them were completely illiterate or ignorant, untrained people, farmers and just regular peasants back in the 1200s and 1300s and stuff like that. And the speeches that they gave to their captors are so unbelievably good. They have Catholic priests who have been trained their whole lives on how to study theology. And these, I don't want to call them ignorant, meaning they're stupid. I mean, they're really uneducated. They're average people. And they give speeches that will just blow you away, that make your heart, weep. They're so inspirational. They're so full of wisdom from Jesus. It is absolutely true when he says, I will give you speech and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to contradict or resist. That is literally true, and you can see it for yourself throughout history. You don't have to wait for a future event to understand that that was true. We've had 2,000 years of Jesus being right about everything. I mean, if I didn't have to work, if I just had all day to do this stuff, I would probably devote an entire channel just to studying the Martyr's Mirror on stream and make videos about these different accounts in here and the testimony that these beloved saints, martyrs, gave as they were about to be killed. Here's one from page 476 from the year 1546. Andrew Smuel and Dirk Peters, the defense and confession of faith, which they made at Amsterdam before the commissaries and the confirmed with their death in the year 1546. It says, "Blessed be the God the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ forever and ever. Amen. Hear my confession to the princes of this world. In the first place, they inquired concerning my faith. I therefore said to them, a scribe came to the Lord and asked him, saying, Master, which is the great commandment? The Lord said to him, Thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and thy neighbor as thyself. This is the greatest commandment, and there is no other. The scribe answered and said, Thou hast answered well, that there is one God, and to love him with all the heart, and with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love our neighbor as ourself, is more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. To this they replied, We know that there is one God, but do you believe that when the priest stands at the altar, God is in his hands? Now you might be confused and think, what is this talking about? This is Catholic priests questioning a Bible believer in 1546. This is before the King James Bible exists. King James Bible was only written in 1611. 1546. This guy is being questioned and about to be killed by Catholic priests, exactly as Jesus said would happen in the Gospel of Luke. So they're asking him, do you believe that when the priest stands at the altar, God is in his hands? That's the Eucharist. If you guys are familiar with the Catholic sacrament of the Eucharist, it's the most important sacrament in the Catholic Church. They teach that the bread and wine that the priest hands to people to eat is literally God. It's idolatry. It's the belief that God is represented in a physical form as the blood and the flesh, and that when you eat the sacrament of the Eucharist, you are literally consuming you're cannibalizing Jesus Christ, who they say is God. So therefore, the question that they gave in 1546 is, do you believe God is in their hands? And so this guy says, I said, no. Stephen said, Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of the Almighty Father, in Acts 7:56. They again said, Do you then not believe he is there? Meaning he's in the church itself, that Jesus comes down to be the Eucharist? And he said, no. So they said, we have been told that when your pastor went on one side of the street and you and two others on the other, you gave no honor either to him or to the sacrament. Is this true? And they said, yes. Or this guy says, yes. So they say, why did you do this? He says, I will tell you, my lords. The Lord says through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 2, verse 8, They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. And the man boweth down, and the great man humbleth himself. Therefore forgive them not. Did you do it for the reason that it was made by the hands of men? Yes, my lords, because I would not offend my Lord my God with it. And then it goes on. There's all these questions. It's like a 50 questions that they give this guy before they end up killing him. And the point is, this guy's answers are so amazing. He's pulling out specific verses of the Bible before the King James Bible exists. There were Bibles before the King James. This is not an expert. These are average people. Jesus was giving them these answers and calling to mind exact verses. And this was the Inquisition. This is how they dealt with people who didn't believe the Pope. And it's also proof that a lot of what the Catholic Church teaches today is trying to erase the history of how bad it was back then, and so that we can all pretend that we're one big happy family and that they weren't trying to kill us for believing in the Bible. But the point is, Jesus was telling the truth. He would give them the words they needed at the time when they were being held prisoner. It's a very real thing. It's amazing. It's a way, and then it was recorded in what he wrote down. And we have the records still. We have these old letters. Thank God that we have the Martyr's Mirror as a permanent record so that they can't rewrite history and make it sound like that's what happened. They want to pretend like there was no torture and murder of Christians. They want to pretend like they were just burning witches or pagans or some random people. No, they were killing Bible-believing Christians in the name of God, but still they were killing Bible-believing Christians. And I will never let people forget that. I will not let that part of history be erased. As long as I live, I will continue to promote the awareness of the atrocities that were done against the blessed saints in history, who are my forefathers, and in a way, all of our forefathers, if you believe that you should be able to read your own Bible and not have to listen to the Pope and their blasphemy and their idolatry and the beast system. The Point of No Return says, that's not what I knew it to be. It's a symbol. And Catchild says, no, God is not there in their hands. Well, just so you guys know, if you had said that 500 years ago, they would have killed you for it. The Catholic Church would have killed you, sometimes in very horrible ways, if you said that God was not literally being handed out for consumption in the Eucharist ceremony. The Point of No Return says it's a commemoration of the body of Christ. The wine is the blood spilled. We don't think we are eating Jesus. Well, I know today people don't teach that as much. Some places still do. But back then, not only did they teach it, they killed people if they didn't go along with that. So just know your history and know that Jesus was right when he said that this is how it was going to go. In verse 16 of Luke chapter 21, he says, you will be betrayed even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you will be put to death. Very clear, no if statement there, just some of you will be put to death. And he's speaking to future generations here as well. And when you look back, you have this huge, thick volume called the Martyr's Mirror. Lots of people were killed for this. And this is only a tiny fraction of the amount of people who did die. These are just the ones they had documented proof of their names and of their tortures and of their confessions and their letters and their all these things. If you had the full book of, if you had the full book of martyrs, it would probably be 8,000 pages long. The Point of No Return says it's not cannibalism. Right, it's not, because it's just a symbol. It is bread and wine. That's what Jesus actually instituted. And so I agree with you. When I said that it's cannibalism, I'm saying that by the logic of the Catholic Church, especially back then, it would be cannibalism because they teach that it's actually the real flesh and blood. And I've looked up Catholic dogma. I think it's still taught that is the real flesh and blood of Jesus, they try to make it sound like it's not actually symbolic. At least, when I was younger, that's still a teaching. Here's what he says, though. You'll be betrayed by your parents, brothers, relatives, friends. Some of you will be put to death, and you will be hated by everyone because of my name. Yet, not one hair of your head will perish. Now, how can that possibly be? Think about it. It says some of you will be put to death in verse 16. And then in verse 18, it says not a hair of your head will perish. So what is he talking about? How does this make any sense? In what sense will not one hair of your head perish? Clearly, you actually die, and they can burn you alive, and then all of the hairs of your head will perish. No, Jesus is here revealing that from God's point of view, you don't die at all when you die as a martyr. When you die for Jesus, you attain life. You become alive. You shed this body, but you don't die. And so that's an even more inspirational hope. And I get a little bit emotional about it because when you read these stories of the martyrs, they think of it that way. I'm just talking about it here in the comfort of my home in a very safe neighborhood, in a very nice place. These people were being locked in dungeons beneath monasteries and cathedrals and were being tortured by mercenaries, and they believed that they would not perish, that they were actually being blessed, and that they would be blessed in the next life because they were faithful to their Lord. It's powerful. It's profound. It transcends all human instinct. The human instinct is to do anything it takes to survive, to scramble, to beg, to plead, to fight, to kill, to run, to do whatever you have to do to survive. The Christian instinct is so different. It is the power of the Holy Spirit and the guidance of God from heaven to say, they're going to kill me. I know they're going to kill me, but I'm going to rejoice that I am counted worthy to suffer for the gospel and for the name of Jesus. In verse 18, it says, by your patient endurance, you will gain your souls. Think of it again. Your patient endurance, you will gain your souls. I have to gain my soul? In what sense do I gain my soul? I have my soul. It's completely in my possession. What does it mean that I have to gain my soul? Well, if you're going to go to hell, your soul will be discarded. You will die and be destroyed, your soul. But if you sacrifice for Jesus Christ, you gain your soul in the sense that you get to keep it, you get to have it forever, and you get to be blessed by God in the next life. Max says, Terry, some of these missionaries who go into the wilderness or jungles get killed by natives. Absolutely. And in Muslim nations, there's a lot of Christians who get killed. In China, which is, I guess, Buddhist/atheist. I don't know where their spirituality is at these days. There's a lot of Christians in China who are basically an underground society, and they get killed. Being a missionary in almost the entire world is dangerous. Poison Gas says, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Absolutely, and it will happen on Judgment Day, and I don't think it will happen before then. Instead, he says, we're going to be hated. It says you're going to be betrayed by your parents. Imagine that, being betrayed by your own parents. by your brothers and relatives and friends. Some of you will be put to death. I believe this is going to become very real as society collapses and Christians get blamed for all the problems in society. The tribulation is going to be about turning the whole world more clearly and more directly against Christians. What's the alternative? Why will they hate Christians? Christians refuse to compromise on the truth. Christians refuse to give up the Bible as the source of truth. And so we don't accept all religions as being equal. We don't accept paganism and New Ageism and syncretism, which is the term when you try to combine all the religions of the world into one. That's called syncretism. We don't accept those things. We have an exclusive gospel that excludes everything else. And so that is the religion of the world. The religion of the world is about trying to create the Tower of Babel again, trying to unify all religions and all nations into this one empire again, just like it was in the Tower of Babel. And so we refuse to be part of that. And so they will hate us for it because we will expose every step of the way what they're doing, just like how I was exposing the green agenda, and I continue to expose the green agenda, and how the Vatican is tied into it. They signed this pact with all the world religious leaders in the Vatican like a year or two ago. 2 years ago. And I got banned for that. They couldn't handle it. The video was going viral. People were looking into it. And so that's a spiritual pact between religious world leaders. And it was all about the green movement, how they were all going to agree to use their religious platforms to convince their congregants to believe that carbon is poison, that we need less people on the planet. So I'm trying to expose the conspiracy in real time as it's happening, the satanic conspiracy, so that we have a fulfillment of this, that they will hate us, they will betray us, they'll put us to death. I don't care. Do it. I don't care what they do to me. We're supposed to be a light to the world. We're supposed to be hated by the world. We're not supposed to make friends with the world. I will actually remind you guys about one of my favorite quotes in the Bible. It's from James. Not a lot of people quote from James, but James 4 verse 4 says, I'll read the New King James Version. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Listen to that. Whoever wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. That's how serious it is. It's not just about, well, I love the world and I like to get along with the world, but I also love God. No, you have to choose. You can either love God or you can be a friend of the world. You cannot be both. I don't want to be an enemy of God, so I can't be a friend of the world. And I try to live according to that. So, Luke chapter 21, Jesus is absolutely being consistent here. The world will hate you. All nations will hate you. Verse 17, you will be hated by everyone because of my name. Israel, some people in the Israel Knesset, influential congressmen or senators or whatever they are, were trying to pass a bill to ban the preaching of Christianity, ban the gospel. Make it illegal, put you in jail for 2 years if you try to teach a teenager or a child about Jesus Christ. Yes, it will get to the point where you will be put in prison for being a Christian. Not because you didn't sign up for a certain app or because there's a certain technology that you didn't embrace, and the whole mark of the beast misunderstanding people have, it's going to be because you stand up for the Bible and Jesus. I think it will be as blatant as that. If you say the Bible is true and you'll have to kill me if you don't want me to talk about it, they will do that. It will get to that point, I believe. Poison Gas says Netanyahu is banning Christianity in Israel as I speak. No, we looked at that story. Netanyahu actually specifically said he's not going to pass any bill that would persecute Christians that way. So let's not get that confused. Netanyahu came out and directly denounced that bill. It was being proposed by some people in their governing body, the Knesset, but Netanyahu, we just looked that up at the start of the stream. Netanyahu said he's not going to have that, and the bill is basically, the proposal is basically dead for now. It doesn't mean it won't happen again a year from now when 2024 election is happening, and who knows what kind of crazy stuff all happens. But it's very true that they were, apparently, they were, I mean, I don't even have to say apparently. We looked it up ourselves. There were people trying to pass that law. Thank God that it's apparently being shut down and not going to happen. But, so it's not fake news in that sense, but you just can't, you have to wait and see what happens. And it turns out they're not going to pass it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. It would speed up the timeline of everything very quickly if that happened. But, you know, they got to gauge the situation. Max says beta tests like toilet paper and eggs. Yeah. Yeah, you do something, you see how people react, and then you dial it back and you sort of bring it back to normal, right? And you get a lot of data that way. There's a lot of social experimentation going on in politics all the time. And persecuting Christians, they always have to dip their toe in the water and see if it's the right time yet to go for it. And I think what they found out this time is that Christians, because of TikTok, by the way, because me and you are talking, because this platform hasn't been banned yet, the awareness spreads so fast and there's such outrage. We're a very effective movement. Christianity is a movement, and it's very effective when it's allowed to spread. And so they want to ban TikTok so that the next time they do something, you won't even hear about it. By the way, I'll just say, I made a Clapper account. A lot of TikTok creators are moving to Clapper, which is an exact clone of it, except it has a dislike button as well as a like button, and it's not as slick because it's just new. But it's the same exact thing. I just posted a video on Clapper today because I believe this is going to get banned. But I think once TikTok is banned, there will be a gigantic landslide of psyops and false flags and persecutions and crazy things that are going to pass. Like, they're storing it up right now because it's going to be huge. And right now, there's such awareness because of this platform. As soon as something happens, you know, 1 million people find out about it and it starts to spread. Yeah, we can talk about that, guys. So, Point of No Return says, it's awful and laggy. I hate Clapper. The reason why it's laggy is because tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people are creating accounts there, and they're not scaled up yet for being able to handle that amount of bandwidth. It's going to be a rough start. Make no mistake about it. Clapper is not polished. It's very, very small and very, very, rough and new compared to TikTok. I already have a Gab. I already have Telegram. You guys check out my link tree. I've got links to all sorts of stuff. Michelle asks, who owns Clapper? Clapper was founded by a guy who I believe is an American national, but he's got a Chinese background. I made actually, let's just look up the Substack that I wrote on it. Oh, I'm not logged in. Let me just... So I did some research. So the founder of Clapper is Edison Chen. His name is. It's um, it's based out of the U.S. It's the guy's got a degree in from Texas and from Chicago, I believe. He's got a Twitter account, whatever, you know, and yeah, he's got a degree from Chicago and from Texas. The number one investor in Clapper is a company called IDG Capital. It is based out of Beijing, China. Okay. That's where the biggest investor in the startup venture capital investment money came from, was from Beijing, China. And they have invested in a bunch of different companies. So as for who owns it, I believe Edison Chen owns it, but he got investment from a Beijing private equity firm called IDG Capital. Point of No Return says the people on it are weird. Look, people on TikTok are weird. When I went on TikTok, I was the only person who was doing these types of videos, it felt like. At least I wasn't finding anyone else. It was a bunch of people hitting on each other and being weird and trying to make each other laugh, and there's a lot of good content too, but you don't use Clapper because it's a cool place. You use it because we can make it what we want if we go there and we do what we want to do. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to make the same kind of videos that I've always made, and then that type of content will suddenly be on the platform because I will be the one making it. My point is much more, to the point. You can go check out my Substack if you want to see more about Clapper, winterchristian.substack.com. I have a post on it. My point is that once TikTok is banned, then they will have the floodgates open to do all sorts of crazy things because there won't be as much awareness of the problem. TikTok is the most powerful platform in the world right now for spreading news. Nobody would have even heard of the East Palestine train derailment if it wasn't for TikTok. That just wouldn't have gone anywhere. But now because of it, suddenly everyone was forced to cover it, and they were trying to hide it, and not talk about it for weeks. And it's still not being talked about enough, but this platform pushed that into the mainstream awareness, and a lot of alternative living, farming, a lot of things. A lot of good comes out of TikTok, and a lot of evil comes out of TikTok. A lot of psyops and a lot of confusion comes out of TikTok. A lot of new ageism and false things. But the point is that we participate in it, and we can find each other, and we can start to do wonderful things. A movement like the Christian movement can flourish as long as we're not completely restricted. So I expect there to be much bigger disasters when TikTok gets banned. And Michelle says no one would have heard about the weather balloon either. That's probably true. Point of No Return says the cooks are good on Clapper, and if it's life's work, I don't know. I guess I use this for something to do. It's not serious to me. I don't know if what I do is serious or not either, but I enjoy being able to connect with real people, and I get to connect to real people on Clapper. And so it's kind of hedging your bet. It's obviously, if this goes wrong, I can continue there with a very similar format and recording system, and I'm sure they'll improve their services as it goes on. And the community will get better as more normal people go in and creators go in and their community follows them maybe, and there's a lot of potential there, is what I'm saying. And right now it's not cool, but I didn't think TikTok was cool when I started using it, and I still don't think TikTok is cool. It's just where I'm trying to meet people in the real world where they actually are. Anyway, what is this all tying back into? It's the world events. The world events when they do a bunch of evil. You'll be hated by all nations because of my name, he says in verse 17 of Luke chapter 21. He says, not a hair of our head will perish, but by your patient endurance you will gain your souls. And so we understand that that means your soul will be preserved by God and not cast into the fire, not destroyed. You will succeed on Judgment Day, and you will be glad that you were killed. You will be glad that you were a martyr. Verse 20. Let's get to verse 20 here. It says, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, this is the part everyone gets excited about. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will know that her desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out. Let those in the country stay out of the city. For these are the days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Keep that in mind. To fulfill all that is written. The days of vengeance. Oh man, there's so much to unpack related to that. If you know my book, you know what I'm talking about, but let's just start here. I saw some videos just yesterday about how America is the whore of Babylon. I've disproved that many times already on TikTok and in the live streams and in my book. Jerusalem, future Jerusalem, is going to become the whore of Babylon. And so when the cities are surrounding it, there is a section in Revelation that talks about the destruction of Babylon. And there's a bunch of armies surrounding it. This is what he's talking about. You know, it talks about Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the earth. And in chapter 18, it talks about how Babylon is falling. It's going to be destroyed. The kings of the earth are going to lament and weep. But those kings of the earth are not the armies. There's a difference between a king and an army. The Antichrist is going to give power to 10 nations, I believe, for 1 hour to go and destroy Babylon. And in this case, we're talking about Jerusalem. And they're going to surround them and they're going to destroy the city. But Jesus says in Luke chapter 21, these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. So it's not a bad thing in that sense. But those who are followers of Jesus need to get out of the city. The 144,000, who I constantly bring up when we're talking about end times prophecy, because they're sort of the main characters of most of Revelation. The 144,000 are going to be followers of Jesus, and they need to get out of the city, and because it will be destroyed. And that's not a bad thing, because it will be the whore of Babylon that gets destroyed by these cities. And it's called the days of vengeance. It's a fulfillment of the day of the Lord, one of the fulfillments that need to happen. So in Revelation 18, it talks about, woe to the great city, the mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. That's the vengeance. The vengeance is going to have a lot to do with, vengeance for what, by the way? For killing the church. Jerusalem in the future, as the whore of Babylon, is going to have some role to play in persecuting Christians. I believe that's my religious conviction based on prophecy. Not political, theological, religious opinion, theory that I have. Jerusalem at some point in the future will turn on Christians and will work with the nations, the kings of the nations, to kill the Christian church. And then God will send destruction upon the whore of Babylon. Now, I don't say that current day Jerusalem is the whore of Babylon, because I think the current day Jerusalem is just a very odd, compromised city like most capital cities in the world. But a time is coming when they will live up to this reputation. And so they're going to do what they can, and it's not going to work. The nations will turn against them. And guys, when you understand that the beast is Rome, and that the Catholic Church is the beast, the second beast, with horns like a lamb and a mouth like a dragon, you actually have this image of the beast coming to destroy the whore of Babylon. So the Catholic Church is going to lead an assault against Jerusalem. Well, that's not new. That's the Crusades. That's what they tried to do over 1,000 years ago. They wanted to retake Jerusalem and capture it and own the Holy Lands. We shouldn't be surprised if that happens again as things get crazier and a bunch of the Christian church gets killed. You might say, well, that means the Catholics would be killed. No, because they're part of the beast. They're not the real Christians. So once you separate the beast from the church, I call the beast the anti-church sometimes to make this more clear. The beast is an anti-church. It's a blasphemous imitation. That's why every time it talks about the beast, it talks about blasphemy. What's blasphemy? Pretending you're the Christian church when you're actually the ones who kill the saints who believe in the Bible. Hint, hint, the martyr's mirror. This is proof that the Catholic Church is anti-Christian. It's the anti-church. But they have millions of people, and they believe in a physical army. They believe in physical crusades and inquisitions and physical dominance and conquest of the world. And so it's actually very realistic in the future for the Catholic Church to turn against Israel, along with the Orthodox Church, I would assume, which is the Russians and the Turks, mostly, Greece and whatever. And then they go against Jerusalem. Jerusalem gets surrounded by these armies, like somebody said. Who said that? That the Catholics are, Cat Child says Catholic churches are everywhere. Most of Latin America is Catholic. The Eastern European nations are Orthodox. A lot of European nations are still Catholic in some sense. So if these nations team up against Israel, it will actually be, by appearances, the Christian nations that go to kill Jerusalem. Now, the reason why they do that, we don't know exactly. But they, it could be because they were, Jerusalem did some sort of persecution against Christians. That could be a reason. This whole idea of passing the bill that persecutes Christians, that could be part of the reason. We don't know what it is. It could be a completely financial thing. It says in Revelation chapter 18 that there was all sorts of precious cargo. Jerusalem basically becomes the trade hub of the world. It becomes the economic master of the world. All trade has to basically go through Israel in the future, through Jerusalem. They're basically on the Silk Road. If Israel suddenly really got involved with the idea of cybersecurity attacks and being the only place where you can safely do exchanges and have financial security, which they've sort of been trying to become, Israel's been trying to become the head of the world's cybersecurity. Well, then, in an age of blockchains and central bank currencies, what's the biggest vulnerability to the whole economic world system? It would be cyber attacks. And so if Israel is the home of cyber attacks and cybersecurity, meaning if you don't team up with Israel, they destroy your cyber networks and your trade systems, your internet. If that were to happen, theoretically, that would mean that they have the key to all world financial trade and commerce. And that would make them the Whore of Babylon. This is all theoretical, but I'm just looking at prophecy and trying to connect dots. But it is possible. And so this is all an interesting interplay because Jesus says the Christians need to flee before that happens. They're not coming for the Christians in Jerusalem. They're coming to destroy the city. They have an opportunity to flee. The 144,000, and if there's more Christians in that, then that's good. But I believe that 144,000 will be the core believers in that time. And then will be the days of vengeance, Jesus says in verse 22, to fulfill all that is written. And so that's the idea of Jerusalem being destroyed. You can go back to Isaiah and read about that. This is Old Testament prophecies. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel talk about Jerusalem being destroyed. Listen to this. I'm going to read from Isaiah now, and you're going to think I'm reading from Revelation. It says, "Your land is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Foreigners devour your fields before you. A desolation," hint, abomination of desolation, "a desolation demolished by strangers. The daughter of Zion is abandoned. Like a shelter in a vineyard, like a shack in a cucumber field, a city besieged. Unless the Lord of hosts has left us a few survivors," the 144,000, "we would have been like Sodom, we would have resembled Gomorrah." That's from Isaiah chapter 1. That's the first chapter of Isaiah, is this warning about Jerusalem being completely destroyed unless God miraculously creates a handful of survivors who are going to be the remnant. Yes, I think that's the 144,000. Derek asked, do you think that's a literal 144,000? Yes, I think there will be at least 144,000 real Israelites who will be Christians in that time, and God will supernaturally protect them through this terrible final tribulation that will involve the whole world turning against Israel and the man of sin and all of the Antichrist kind of stuff that happens at that time. You can go to chapter 1, verse 1 of Isaiah. Starts by saying, "This is the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah saw during the reign of Uzziah," and so on. So it specifically says that this is a prophecy concerning Judah and Jerusalem. So don't get caught up in this idea, this fake idea, that Jerusalem is eternally protected by God and will never, ever face any troubles. Isaiah still has not been fulfilled. It has to be fulfilled at some point. And Jesus says in Luke 21, "These are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written." What Isaiah wrote about has to happen still. And Jesus says that that's going to come in the future. Now, a lot of people think that would happen when Rome destroyed Jerusalem in 132 BC or 132 AD or whenever, the Second Temple was destroyed, and then like 50 years later or whatever, then the city itself was basically completely destroyed. I don't believe that's the fulfillment, because at that time it wasn't a bunch of nations surrounding Jerusalem. It was just the Romans. Rome destroyed Jerusalem. This is describing many armies surrounding Judea, surrounding Jerusalem, and so I don't think, and then plus, if all these things were fulfilled, we wouldn't have had 2,000 years of history afterwards. So this is all a very interesting commentary, very cryptic what Jesus is talking about. But if you know Isaiah and you know Jeremiah, you know, well, you wouldn't know Revelation because it wouldn't have been written yet when Jesus was saying this. But we can look at Revelation and see how this ties in. Again, this is all stuff that I tried to lay out in my book. Maybe everyone is wrong. I still like that title. Revelation's Conspiracy and the Kingdom of Heaven. There's a reason why that subtitle is so important. There's a conspiracy happening, and it's going to fulfill Revelation, and maybe everyone is wrong. Maybe these mainstream interpretations we've had are not looking clearly at what it's saying. Brian says on YouTube, Israel is looking to ban Christianity. Yes, we talked about that at the start of this study. We looked at the stories. Just today, there's a bunch of stories that came out saying they are not going to ban Christianity at this point. Benjamin Netanyahu said he's not going to pass any bill that bans Christianity. But they were proposing the idea of actually arresting people and putting them in jail for 2 years if you taught a teenager or a child about Jesus. So we're getting very, very close. It's nothing to panic about because prophecy has to be fulfilled, but it is getting very close. Jesus said we can look at the signs of the sky and the season of the tree, the fruit on the tree growing ripe, and we know that the signs are going to happen. That I believe later in this same chapter he's going to talk about that. But, it's starting right now. And in a way, it's all been building up for a long time, so we don't know how long it's going to take. But anyway, verse 23, how miserable those days will be for pregnant and nursing mothers. For there will be great distress upon the land and wrath against this people. Which people? The people who live in Jerusalem. Clearly, that's what he says. So God is not going to protect everybody who lives in Jerusalem. Those who listen to Jesus are supposed to abandon Jerusalem, say goodbye Jerusalem, get as far away as possible, and let the city be destroyed. If there are Messianic Jews living in Jerusalem, they will leave because they will see that the warnings of Jesus are coming true, and they will leave the city. But those who don't listen to Jesus will just be killed. It says in verse 24, they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive into all nations. So there's slavery that's going to happen as well. A great enslavement. By the way, there was also a lot of enslavement that happened when Hadrian destroyed Jerusalem in like 130 BC, or sorry, I keep saying BC, 130 AD. Hadrian did lead a bunch of Jews captive and send them into the Roman Empire as slaves. So somebody said that Jane says there's also dual fulfillment. Yes, absolutely, you're right. There's a partial fulfillment at some point, and then there's a epic final fulfillment later on. And I believe we're waiting for that epic final fulfillment. By the way, guys, thank you for the 11,000 likes here. This is one of the best studies that we've ever done. I absolutely love Luke chapter 21. It ties so many things together. I love that it's there, not in Revelation. You don't have to go to Revelation to understand that these things were being prophesied by Jesus Christ's own mouth. Jesus Christ talked about these things. You don't even need Revelation to get a lot of the prophecy. But Revelation is the final form, the final set of hints as to how it happens. But if you combine Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel with what Jesus says right here, you have like 60% of the prophecy already in place, and you understand kind of how it has to work. And so I absolutely love this chapter. For as scary and weird as it is, it's just very amazing. It's mind-blowing. I am astounded. I have to glorify God when I read this stuff. It's just too profound, too amazing. The headlines we're seeing today about Christians being banned and jailed in Israel are fulfilling, or again, if it doesn't pass, it's not the fulfillment yet, but they're touching on it. They're getting close to it. This is all true. Martyr's Mirror proves that it was true hundreds of years ago. 500 years ago, people were being killed for the name of Jesus because they refused to believe the Pope and they believed the Bible instead. And what Jesus said about giving them speech as they're arrested and being questioned by their captors is also true. All of the things that Jesus said are true. And miraculously, amazingly true, not just a little bit true. It says in verse 24, "And Jerusalem will be trodden down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled." I believe that's the man of sin. That's going to be the man of sin when Jerusalem gets destroyed, and there's going to be the man of sin who sets himself up in the temple after the abomination of desolation. So verse 25, Jesus says there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on earth dismay among the nations. And if you know my theory of how the cataclysms of Revelation work, it's very, very realistic to think that there will be absolute pandemonium and dismay among the nations of the earth when there's a giant meteor which comes down and impacts the ocean and the land, destroys the world's water supply, kills a third of the human population, and blacks out the sky, and all of the other things that happen when that happens. So it says there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and the earth will be dismayed by what happens. I believe that will be very true. And it says they will be bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. What does Revelation say? The way I interpret it, Revelation is talking about a meteor big enough to destroy the planet being split into two parts, and one half of it goes into the ocean. The waves that will happen there might be big enough to destroy entire nations. It will be the biggest waves in human history. Jesus talks about it in verse 25 of Luke chapter 20 or 21. They will be bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. Verse 26, "Men will faint from fear and anxiety over what is coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Yes, in fact, in Revelation chapter 6, let's just go there. There's no reason to be afraid of it. Let's just go look at it. It says that the kings of the earth will hide in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, and they will say to the mountains, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who will be able to stand?" They will be terrified. De Unction says the Gentiles are occupying it now, referring to Jerusalem. They're partly occupying it, for sure. There's a lot of Muslims, there's a lot of Jews, there's a lot of Orthodox Christians. But it is not the time of the Gentiles. It is not this is clearly talking about a occupation, supremacy, military conquest, not just permission to live there. Derek says, when these major events occur, how will the devil trick the non-believers that it's not biblical? That's a very good question that I do talk about in my book, and I'm happy to answer it. If this is a meteor, we know that I think since NASA was created, they've been talking about planet killer asteroids and meteors. They've been talking about it. They're doing experiments to send out rockets and nuclear bombs and stuff to go and intercept meteors that come to the Earth. This is all being treated as a very mathematical formula, as a science. And so I think there will always be a level of plausible deniability that is in this prophecy. By the way, the Christians will have been murdered at this point. The ones who actually believe the truth about the Bible will be killed. So we won't be there to tell them any differently. That's why it has to happen in the order that it does. Christians get killed. Jesus, remember, let's go back. Jesus said in which verse? Verse 12. It says, before the earthquakes and famines and nations rising against nations and the fearful signs from heaven, before the fearful signs from heaven, they will seize you and persecute you. You know, they will deliver you over, and some of you will die. You will have to defend yourselves, and that's your opportunity to be a witness. So the Christian church has to die first. It's not a rapture. I don't know why people bring the rapture into this. Jesus says before this, you have to be seized and killed. So you will be killed, and then great, crazy signs are going to happen in the sky. And who is going to be there to tell all the people of the world that this is a fulfillment of prophecy? There's going to be false prophets instead. It says that there will be false prophets. So it actually makes perfect sense that the voice of truth is eliminated. God decides to bring vengeance upon the earth, which is going to largely center on Jerusalem because it will have at that point become the whore of Babylon. They will destroy Christianity. Then God will seek vengeance, which is why it says in verse 22, these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. The vengeance is for killing the Christians. That's the thing that God cares about. God doesn't care about, almost anything in the world right now except Christianity, because this is his kingdom. This is his thing that he started. So when they kill the Christians, he's going to take vengeance. And that's when the crazy stuff is going to start to happen. They're already preparing the world for this. They created the bunkers and the underground, under the mountain hideaway facilities and underground cities under the deception of the Cold War and nuclear war. They built the bunkers that they're going to flee to, Iron Mountain and all the New Zealand places. There's places in Ohio and these different places that the rich people have been building as doomsday bunkers. Really, they're going to be interconnected underground cities, which is what a lot of Elon Musk's tunneling the Boring Company and all of that stuff is related to, is to try to connect underground military bases and underground cities so that when this happens, they will have a place to flee to. The Bible says that they will hide under the mountains. And they're really going to do that. The elite satanic conspiracy will literally hide under mountains in order to try to escape the judgment. And guess what? They're going to succeed. A lot of them are going to succeed. Because what's happening in this passage, in the sixth seal of Revelation in chapter 6, is not the day of the Lord. It's not the final fulfillment. They just think that it is. I call it the prank apocalypse, because God is going to make them think that he's coming for his final judgment, but it's not. They're going to hide, and they're going to all get together because they know they killed the Christians, and they know that God is angry, and there's going to be these great signs in heaven, but the time is still not yet. He's going to fulfill these cataclysms. He's going to show all these wonders. It says in, it says in verse 25, which I think we're up to now. It says, Many people will fall by the sword and be led captive into all nations. Jerusalem will be trodden down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. It says in verse 25, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations, bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. Men will faint from fear and anxiety over what is coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. That's the hiding under the mountains we see in Revelation. Jane says Elon could be the false prophet. He could be, but, I mean, sure, he could be. I don't know if he's liked enough by people to fulfill that role, but somebody will be there. Certainly Elon Musk is no savior figure. He's not gonna save the world, but he's acting like he can. Max says that's why they want to goad Russia or China into nuclear war. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but definitely they want you to think that Russia is Gog and Magog. You've heard that a million times. There's no basis for it whatsoever. It's completely unrelated to the Bible. But for some reason, in prophecy studies, we're always told that Russia is Gog and Magog. Why? Why are we Christians supposed to believe that Russia is Gog and Magog? Oh, because they're the ones who come and attack Jerusalem in the prophecy. And they don't even pay attention to the fact that that only happens after the millennial kingdom of Jesus. When Satan is released from the bottomless pit, it's a completely different time period. But they just want you to start thinking about Russia as being this big final evil. And so all of these things have propaganda already for over a century already. They've been preparing these different pieces and trying to conspire to create the end-time scenario in a way that will deceive Christians. Of course, they're going to have their whole alien agenda they're going to throw in there. They're not going to accept Jesus. They're going to say aliens are doing stuff. Aliens are the ones who are punishing humanity. It's not Jesus. It can't be Jesus. It's not God. It can't be God. Aliens are punishing us because we didn't sacrifice enough humans for the Mother Earth. Something like that. I talk about that in my book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole. This book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole, is specifically about the psyops that we are currently experiencing that are going to lead to the end-time deception. If you want to just have a purely focus on the end-time deception, get the book Fire in the Rabbit Hole. I'll just read part of what it says on the back. Whether it's Q, aliens, alt-media journalists, DMT, quantum physics, or the radical revisionists claiming language and history are elaborate magic tricks to enslave us, many of the loudest freethinkers have suspicious connections that point to a deeper agenda. They hope to destroy traditional thinking, not in order to enlighten us, but in order to make way for a new age revolution of post-truth horror. This book is about how, I'll read you some of the chapter names. The Admiralty Law Theory. That's a lot to do with Jordan Maxwell and David Icke. Quantum Reality. QAnon. Well, I have one here on Joe Rogan. It's not called Joe Rogan, but it's a chapter on Joe Rogan. Syncretism. The First Earth Battalion, which is the New Age wing of the U.S. military. Flat Earth Theory. DMT. UFOs. The Zohar. These are chapters in the book because I want to expose the deception that's leading up to this, because they want to control the narrative as we're getting into these end-time fulfillments. They're desperate to control it. It's, again, why they're going to... Right now, they're flooding TikTok with false information, but because us Christians are still here and we're succeeding, they want to just ban the app altogether because they can't control the narrative. That's the big thing leading into this huge tribulation, is control the narrative. Control the narrative. We're supposed to go to Twitter and trust Elon Musk to protect our free speech. Richard says it's sad, or sorry, it's said that Elon isn't the prophet, but will provide the number quoted from his mother. Oh, right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, he's involved in an occult family. They have emerald mines in South Africa. They're a very creepy family. They have Elon Musk's grandfather. A lot of people don't know this still. Elon Musk's grandfather was a Canadian politician. He wanted to create a Canadian political party called Technocracy Incorporated. Technocracy Incorporated. I believe that was the name. I know Technocracy was in it. I think it was Technocracy Incorporated. Around World War I or II, he wanted to create a political party in Canada. He failed, and so he moved to South Africa. But this is the background of Elon Musk. Openly saying, we want technocracy and we want it to be combined with a corporation. Governance by corporation. What is Elon Musk? Elon Musk has so many military contracts, I don't even know why people pretend he's a businessman. He's a military asset. He's the guy that owns Twitter. We're supposed to go and trust him with free speech. He's the big savior. He's going to take us to Mars and dig into the earth and connect underground cities and do all these cool things. Tens of thousands of satellites for Starlink internet. He's a military asset. His grandfather comes from technocratic, corporatist control freaks. His mom is all weird. He said that his father was this evil man, this Satanist or whatever. He himself wears demon armor and laughs about it and stuff. Yes, we need to be aware of the deception going into this period of the Green World Order, what I call the Green World Order, which is about drugs, fake spirituality, fake truth movements, flat earth, this sort of pagan, primeval idea of the world, and of course they're going to have aliens mixed in there too. And so that's, to answer your question, how they're going to deceive so many people at that time. They're going to have the whole world drugged up, enslaved, fearful, worshiping aliens, which are actually demons, all that stuff. Michelle says, exactly, that's why I asked who owned Clapper. Yeah, it's always good to look into who owns things. From what I can tell, Edison Chen, the owner of Clapper, hasn't done anything crazy yet. Just seems to be an entrepreneur. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Kathy says, do you believe in the firmament? Well, the firmament is a shield or dome that was supposed to be far out from the earth and have an expanse within it. The firmament refers to the expanse. And so I certainly believe that there's a giant expanse called space, and that beyond that, God can have anything he wants. Do I think that the firmament is 1,000 feet up, or do I think that it's a mile above the Earth's surface? No, not at all. I don't believe that it's just above the clouds. I believe that if there is a firmament like a window dome, it's much further out than we generally think, or I guess science doesn't believe in it at all, but other people think that the firmament is like this really nearby thing that you could hit with a rocket. You know, I don't believe that. But I also say in the book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole, that I don't think anyone knows how the world is constructed. And I think it's kind of blasphemous to say that you do know, because the Bible doesn't say it. You know, the Bible says that the earth has 4 corners, but then it also has other teachings about the circle of things. And then it starts to sound more like it's round. Certainly no flat earth model makes any sense. De Unction says flat earth is biblical. It's not. Not only is it not biblical, but it defies any reason. when you go south, you go to Australia, the moon is upside down. That doesn't make any sense in a flat Earth model. Why would the moon be upside down when you get far south if the Earth is flat? Because all you would be doing is looking on a disk. You'd be moving towards the edges of the disk. The moon is up here. You would still see the moon from every angle the same way. But instead, the moon seems like it's upside down. Well, it makes sense if you actually are traveling around and you're standing upside down on the south side of the planet looking at the same object. It would start to look like the moon is upside down. So, and by the way, flat Earth is not the same as geocentrism. I don't believe that the Earth is flat because evidence it doesn't make any sense. The evidence doesn't support it. But I think that geocentrism could be real. I think that maybe everything rotates around the Earth. Do I have proof of that? No. God is the only one who knows how creation works. Desordine says the moon is a projection. Bro, don't pretend like that's from the Bible. And by the way, what I do in my book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole, I have a whole chapter on the flat Earth. I show how all the leaders of the flat Earth movement are pagans. They actually hate Christianity. Did you know that? They use all sorts of Christian verses. They try to spin the Bible. But actually, they believe in New Ageism. They believe in syncretism. That's weird. You guys know David Weiss? The big flat earther YouTuber David Weiss? Did you know that he actually belongs to something called the Syncretism Society? It was founded by Santos Bonacci. Yeah, that's not Christian. Syncretism is the opposite of Christianity. They use the Bible to lie to Christians by twisting verses, and then because people love the Bible, they get confused and they say, well, I guess I better believe in flat Earth. But they are pagans. You're being led by pagans in a psyop. David Weiss sells an app on the App Store called the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. It's about meeting up with people who have the same astrological sign as you. They are New Agers who believe in sun gazing, sun worship. It's all about sacred geometry, about how the earth is this sacred thing you have to worship. Yes, the flat earth, everything is a lie. Satellites are not real. Space isn't real. The moon isn't real. Nothing is real except the earth. Worship the earth. You guys can believe whatever you want, of course. But when you look into who's doing this, who's behind it, it's all pagans. Neo-pagans, syncretists. So that's where you're getting your information from. Your models don't make any sense. You can't explain basic phenomenon. The Bible doesn't say that the earth is flat. You just think that it does because you've been brainwashed to think that it does. Go back and read it again, knowing that pagans were lying to you, and you will see that it doesn't say that. The Bible uses figurative language in all sorts of ways. It talks about the four corners of the earth, and yet one of these people here in the chat said that it's a circle. Well, a circle doesn't have four corners. So which one is it? Four corners of the earth is a figure of speech. So is saying a bunch of different things. But the authors of the Bible did not pretend to know how the universe was created. That was the sole domain of God. God is the one who understands how the universe was created, not humanity. Stop being arrogant. Stop presuming that you know how the universe was made. That's absurd. NASA pretends that they know, and they don't know. I don't defend NASA. NASA is an evil organization. So that's what I do in the book. I deconstruct the arguments, and I help people to realize they've been deceived, that the movement of the sun doesn't make any sense on the flat earth, the moon doesn't make any sense on a flat earth. Nothing that they say makes sense in the flat earth theory. You just have to keep playing along on their game, and guess what it all leads to? It all leads to this idea that you can trust your intuition, that because it looks like the earth is stationary and flat, it must be stationary and flat. Don't trust your, experiments. Just trust your intuition. Stare at the sun. Isn't the sun so wonderful? Isn't the earth so wonderful? I've studied dozens of sources of flat earth, hundreds of hours of flat earth when I was doing my research on the book. I know all about their nonsensical idea of the lenses and the optics and the old maps and all of these things. You can't explain basic phenomena in the flat earth. And so this is one of the psyops. I'm glad that you're talking about this on the channel because it helps everybody see how real the psyop is, how much the deception is already creeping into Christianity. You guys are in very grave danger of getting sucked into the neo-pagan religion, which is the Green World Order, that is going to take over. It's based on doing drugs, witchcraft, paganism, earth worship, aliens, and get into this whole other thing that you think that you're just a Bible believer, but you're twisting the Bible, you're letting pagans twist it. And again, you're going to say the earth moves. Oh, you're talking about heliocentrism and the movements of the galaxies. I didn't say that. The earth could be stationary and round at the same time. So that's another false dichotomy. New Agers always use false dichotomies. They always say you either have to believe our crap, our pagan beliefs, or you believe everything NASA says. You believe in evolution. You believe in billions of years of creation, the Big Bang. You believe in everything NASA says. Or you have to go with literal pagans who worship the sun and worship the earth and hate Jesus Christ and hate God. Listen to David Weiss talk about God. He can't even say the word Bible properly. He can't even talk about Jesus. He's ashamed. He hates Jesus. But he'll talk about sun gazing and how it fills his soul with this mystical energy and stuff because he's a pagan. He sells an app that is about the zodiac. So again, believe what you want. They believe the sky is divided into 12 sections that corresponds to the zodiac, and it all makes nice sense on their pagan, flat earth, Freemason symbolism. Their sacred geometry that they love so much. And I'm here saying, I don't know how the universe is created. Only God in his infinite wisdom knows that. There's a lot of things that God did simply to mess with us so that we could never find out the truth. And I will just conclude this statement by saying, in the study of prophecy that I did, I actually believe that the measurement of the heavens plays a very big role in end times prophecy itself. End times prophecy is tied to the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole, what I call the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole. I will show it to you guys just so that you have direct evidence of it, so you don't have to take my word for it. Let's just go ahead and read the New King James Version. Jeremiah 31 verse 37 says this. Behold. Oh, wait, that's 31. 37. Uh, so it says in verse 37, thus says the Lord, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, says the Lord. So actually, the quest to measure the heavens, which is NASA's whole plan, and the quest of the pagans to go and rethink it and, have their own theory about the heavens, all this hustle and bustle about trying to measure the heavens and figure out the exact construct of the universe is tied in with this old prophecy that Satan is trying to take advantage of in order to cast off the seed of Israel, to break the covenant with Israel. It's an evil satanic conspiracy to try to pretend that humanity can understand exactly how the world and the sky and the heavens works. So I'm glad this comes up. I'm glad that that I was going to call Freemasons. Flat earthers can, I'm glad that you have free speech and that you can say what you believe. I have no problem with that. I don't want flat earthers to be censored and banned or anything like that. But you are being tricked by pagans. It's not biblical, and it doesn't make sense in reality when you look at the actual moon and you understand anything about the southern hemisphere. And so, thank God that we can still talk about this right now, but it is proof of where things are going, into this very slippery slope towards paganism and witchcraft. And, trust nothing. Trust only your own intuition. The truth is within your own mind. We all have our own truth that we are exploring. You give up on objectivity. You give up on true science, which is Christian. You give up on all of that stuff, and you just start to follow these cult leaders. Here's what it says. Let's keep going, because we've talked a lot about that. So it says in verse 25, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth, and dismay among the nations who are bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. I believe that's because of the meteor impact that's going to happen. Men will faint from fear and anxiety over what's coming on the earth, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. I believe that's them hiding under the mountains, like they've built the bunkers already for that. Verse 27, and at that time they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, I believe they'll be hiding under the mountains for a long time. I believe they're going to almost permanently be stationed in their underground cities. And so for that time to be, he's talking about the span of however many years here, I believe. At that time, during that final time period, they will see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. That will be the day of the Lord. When these things begin to happen, stand up and lift your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And this message, I believe, is given basically to the 144,000 Israelites who will be there in the last days. They will have to flee Jerusalem, but then they will have to wait for the rapture, which is their protection. The rapture will save the 144,000, not the Christian church. We're almost finished here, but the comments are coming in so nicely. I really appreciate this conversation. Desordine says, from what I have heard, and Catholicism has parts of paganism. Absolutely. Catholicism has all sorts of paganism in it. I am definitely not a Catholic. De-Unction says, do you know the globe is rather a new idea? Our fathers had a different idea. Joshua commanded the sun to stand still. If you don't believe in heliocentrism, which is not the same as a round earth, flat earth and geocentrism are not the same idea. The earth could be completely stationary, and the sun could turn around the earth And it would not mean that the earth is flat. Those are two different ideas. You don't have to choose flat earth or everything NASA says. You can believe in a stationary round earth. That would make perfect sense, even in a very literal way, for how the sun stood still. Defenders of Jesus Christ says they are bearing false witness against 17,000 NASA employees, engineering, innovation, and education. Well, your name is Defenders of Jesus Christ, but it sounds like you're the defender of NASA. I don't defend NASA. I defend Jesus Christ, which is the guy who's talking to me in the gospel here. I don't have to believe anything NASA says because it's a government-funded operation that was founded by Nazis, and I don't have to believe anything they're saying. That has nothing to do with, and as far as false witness goes, by me saying I don't believe in them, that's false witness. No, I'm being a true witness about my own beliefs. So I don't believe what NASA tells me. I don't believe that we went to the moon. I certainly believe that anybody who went to the moon would never make it back. I don't trust NASA. That doesn't mean I believe in New Age syncretism and crazy flat earth theories. Kathy says, New Age theories drive me crazy every time I see them. Desordine now says we can also be in a simulation, like the Matrix. I don't think so. I don't think that makes any sense if you're a Christian. In what sense are we in a matrix, a simulation? Are you just saying that reality is exactly the same as we always thought, except secretly there's a way in which God simulated it? Or are you saying that there is a real reality outside of this that we are just a part of, and that a human-like race or aliens are simulating us? Because now you're talking about a completely different religion that you buy into. Reality is just reality. There are a spiritual dimension above this that is infused and within this, but this is the reality that we live in. There's much that's hidden from our eyes, but it's not a simulation. That's a false way of framing it. Defenders of Jesus Christ says, oh my God, I'm so glad you are not a flat earther. No, I have a whole chapter in my book on why you don't have to trust NASA, but you can also completely reject the flat earth theory, which I believe is a psyop. Here's what I say in the book. I say, I reserve the right to not believe any particular thing about the way that God created things. I actually have the right to say, I don't know how the world was created. I don't know how God framed the heavens. I'm not like, if you did the Job thing where he talks to Job and he asks him all these questions, those questions are rhetorical, right? Because Job doesn't actually understand anything about creation. And so he's teaching humility to a human being for questioning God and presuming to know. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a guy who thinks I know as much as God knows. All I know is that the evidence that I see does not line up with a flat earth. That doesn't mean that God couldn't have some other tremendous, interesting way of framing things. But no, I am not a flat earther. I am very much against it. And yet, I reserve the right to give God all of the glory, say he knows everything. I know very little. I don't even know what happened before I was born. And most of my memories of my own life are vague, and I barely remember those. So how could I possibly understand what the sun is and what the moon is and what all of the glory of God's heavens are? I'm nothing. I'm a fool. I barely know anything about my own life. It's so ridiculous to think you can create a model of the universe, but that's what Satan wants to do. And he creates cults around these theories that are basically religions. And NASA is, I believe, a regular government institution in many ways, but in another dimension, there's parts of it that are basically a satanic cult. They're basically there to propagandize children, to get them away from the Bible, away from God, and to convince them that this secular humanist worldview is true. So I don't trust them. But I also don't trust David Weiss and Santos Bonacci and Jordan Maxwell and David Icke and Alex Jones and Joe Rogan and all these guys who are slowly pushing us into this earth worship cult where they all talk about the Bible. They're all Christians. They all believe in, well, Joe Rogan doesn't. He actually makes fun of Christians. But David Icke will like pretend to be a Christian for a little bit. But then when he starts talking, he's like, we have to, meditate and expand our consciousness faster than the speed of light in order to exit this simulation so that we can transcend to the next dimension. And it's like, okay, now you're not talking about Christianity at all anymore. Now you've got your own cult. And so I'm against all of that stuff. The Bible is correct. We don't understand the Bible fully. And God has many mysteries that are beyond our reach. And that's a good thing because God is greater than us and we're not supposed to understand everything. I do recommend people get Fire in the Rabbit Hole. There's a digital copy if you don't want a physical copy. And you can listen to it for free on my podcast, the Not Done Yet podcast. Okay. We have to move on here. We have to keep going in these verses. It says that at that time they will see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory, when the heavens are shaken and people are fainting from anxiety. It says, when these things begin to happen, stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. I believe that's for the 144,000 Israelites because Revelation frames it that way as far as I can tell. Verse 29, Jesus told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near. Speaking of the millennial kingdom, the earthly kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. That gets a lot of people confused. In the same way that he says, not a single hair of your head will perish, right after telling them they're going to be put to death. How can there be all these things, nations against nations, earthquakes, persecutions, trials, the powerful men hiding under the mountains, the signs of these things happening? How can all of that happen in this first generation within the first 100 years of Jesus? It didn't happen. The term generation is deliberately a very stretchy word in Greek and in Hebrew and in English, actually. Every time you talk about a generation, you're talking about a certain age, a certain time period that is not clearly defined. It says in verse 33, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Let's look up this word generation. It is Strong's 1074, genia, in Greek. It means a generation. If repeated twice or with another word, time word, it practically indicates infinity of time. Let's look up Thayer's. It can refer to a whole multitude of men living at the same time. It can mean a race of men. But it can also mean, in the fourth definition of it, because it's used many different ways, it can mean an age. Look up the definition of the word, and you will see, or the history of the word, the lexicon of the word, you'll see that it can mean an age. i.e., the time ordinarily occupied with each successive generation, the space from 30 to 33 years, most ordinarily, but it can also mean multiple generations. So it means an age, a time period, and when it's used figuratively, it can mean let's see here. Ages gone by, for ages since the generations began, from the generations of old, unto generations of generations throughout all ages, forever. So, if you were to take this literally, Jesus would just be lying, because it wasn't 30 to 33 years after he said this that there was, not even the temple was destroyed. And certainly Jerusalem wasn't completely destroyed. And so there's lots of things that were false if Jesus is talking about a literal generation here. Even if he was talking about 100 years, it wouldn't be true, because the Son of Man did not come back in great glory, and there weren't giant waves that destroyed things, and people were not fainting out of fear, and there wasn't the nations surrounding Jerusalem. It was just Rome that destroyed Jerusalem. There's a lot of things that would be false if this was literally true. But as you just look at what he's saying, he says, like I said, that in verse 18, not even a hair of your head will perish. And yet, he also says 2 verses earlier that you're going to be put to death. So he's not talking literally here. This is a prophecy. Some of it's more literal than others. But it says, watch yourselves, or your hearts watch yourselves, or your hearts will be weighed down by dissipation, drunkenness, and the worries of life. And that day will spring upon you suddenly like a snare, for it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the earth. First of all, if it was fulfilled in the first generation, it did not happen to the whole earth. There was definitely, most of the world had no idea what was going on around Jerusalem back here. So it was not all who dwell on the face of the earth. It says in verse 36, so keep watch at all times and pray that you may be deemed worthy to escape all that is about to happen and to stand before the Son of Man. And then the last 2 verses of the chapter say, every day Jesus taught at the temple, but every evening he went out to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. And early in the morning, all the people would come to him to hear him at the temple. So that's the end of the chapter. Somebody mentioned the age of Pisces. I want to acknowledge that, because that's another huge theme of my book, Fire in the Rabbit Hole, about the age of Aquarius. The age of Pisces is also called the age of Aquarius, or I guess the last age was called the age of Pisces, and it's now leading into the age of Aquarius. That's how it's supposed to work. So the new age is the age of Aquarius, supposedly. And here I talk about it. I'll just read from my book here. The age of Pisces was about kindness, love for your fellow man, self-sacrifice, and spirituality instead of materialism. But it had a negative characteristics too, like submission, isolation, and fanaticism. On the other hand, the age of Aquarius is about destroying outdated systems and creating total equality among mankind. Collectivism and androgyny are key aspects, and individuality and personal differences are rejected as obstacles to unity. The lessons learned from the age of Pisces are not discarded, but become part of the inner life of the new breed of the Aquarian leader. This is all, if you research the paganism, which is tied in with the flat earth, this is where it leads you. The chakras and the zodiac and the 12 signs and all this paganism leads to this Pisces and Aquarian sort of logic. So a person who believes in astrology would think that they need to internalize the nice moral lessons of Jesus about loving each other, but work overtime to collapse our society and erase individual rights. Once you understand this new age way of thinking, you can see why so many leaders fall for the satanic program of tolerating Christianity's existence while believing they are ahead of the curve when they burn the world to the ground and enslave people. None of this is based on reality, as we can see by the disagreements between astrologers on the date of when the Age of Aquarius began. In the 1960s, during the Cold War, infiltrating Nazis and Marxists were inventing American counterculture and trying to steer baby boomers towards an anti-Christian death cult. They created bogus rationale for the timing being right then. Hence the famous hippie song named after the Age of Aquarius. Today, every year that goes by sees a new batch of equally stupid theories for why the Age of Aquarius is finally happening right now. They are all dancing to the drum of Satan, racing to obey the will of the stars above. They feel the need to destroy Christianity, promote transsexuality, erode the family unit, and implement a collectivist nightmare in the name of love. They are slaves to dark powers, blind, knowing nothing, but thinking that they are powerful and wise. The Age of Aquarius teaches inner divinity, the union of spirits, and a personal mystery as we are absorbed into the great unknown. The heart chakra, with its green color, is an air sign that unifies the heavens and the earth, the spiritual and the material. We no longer worship God as a supreme being above us, but discard our physical bodies by either accepting this new paradigm or being killed. Either way, we ascend. Yes, death worship will become real. Remember, death itself is the rider of the green horse, according to Revelation, and it has the power to kill 25% of the planet. And then from then I go on to incorporate the UFO and alien stuff and how that's all about protecting Mother Earth. The whole Age of Aquarius, I talk about it in the book Fire in the Rabbit Hole. The psyops, the mysticism. If you want to read another great book, much bigger and more thorough, Game of Gods by Carl Teichrieb, The Temple of Man in the Age of Reenchantment. I love that subtitle, The Age of Reenchantment. That's this paganism that I'm talking about. Carl Teichrieb is an amazing researcher, one of the best in the entire world. And he's kind of shy. He doesn't do a lot of his own publicity, but he published this book in recent years, Game of Gods. It talks about the Age of Reenchantment. And it's all about this sort of new paganism that's coming around. All right, guys. Let's see. Kendra says the simulation is the mind control tactics they use, and people are blinded and feed in, blind to the real truth. In that sense, I guess I could understand the idea of that we live in a simulation. But I would also argue that it's not a very good simulation then, because Christians still exist. We're still having real conversations. They're struggling very hard to keep the truth suppressed. This is the thing about the satanic conspiracy. They have all the power in the world, but they can't stop Christianity. They can't stop us from telling the truth. And so they're actually scared. They're actually desperate. So that's why I don't really accept the simulation idea either, is because the gospel is winning. More people are being saved, and they can't stop it because the internet is about free speech. It allows us to communicate. They're terrified. And so they have to start killing people and destroying the critical infrastructure and, totally re-hijacking the education system and brainwashing kids and controlling the mass media and get more and more crazy trying to control the truth because we are winning. If you give Christians an inch, they will take it a mile. We will get ahead of every conspiracy theory. We will expose every lie. We will debunk all of their lies. We will expose who they are, and they can't stop it. So they have to just end up killing us. And that's funny. We should laugh at the conspiracy because they suck so much. They're such losers. Who are these people? I've met these people in real life. They're the people in high school who are such losers, who have nothing going on in their heads. All they can do is try to tear you down. All they can try to do is tell on you, to control, to try to get in good with the teacher. And maybe if I do that, maybe they cheat on their tests. And it's the same people who go and become these leaders who can't beat us at anything. So they have to try to kill us. Let's just kill them. Let's ban their account. Let's censor them. Let's destroy their platforms. Let's erase their websites. Let's have fact checkers go. It's losers. The elite are losers. They go to these big schools and they have their big degrees and they have all these elite parties and their pedophile islands and they're above the law and they've got everyone in their pocket and they are just losers. Pathetic idiots. They can't compete with the gospel. The gospel is the most powerful force in the history of the world. It transforms everything. It turns losers into decent people. It can even save them. It can save the elite. Turnip Farming says, pray for their salvation. Indeed, we should. And it's possible. The most elite, evil, satanic pedophile can be saved by Jesus Christ. But this is the thing. Defenders of Jesus Christ says, hashtag Satan is a loser. It's true. He loses in every way, and he will be thrown into a lake of fire in the end. He's got no victory. He's got no hope. I'm not talking about individuals here. You're not supposed to judge individuals. But you can make judgment statements about the satanic conspiracy. Come on, man. You can say anyone who belongs to that movement is a wicked, degenerate person. Jesus called the people in his own day vipers, which was about as bad as you could call somebody. So, in that sense, we can judge. We're just not supposed to say Bill Gates in particular is going to go to hell, for example. I wouldn't say that because I have no idea what God is going to do with Bill Gates one day from now. God can completely transform that guy's life. He could become a complete, he could become a martyr. He could become an insider, a whistleblower. He could do anything. God can do anything with anyone. That's the amazing thing about it. But what I'm saying is that the force, the satanic, who Satan recruits into his conspiracy are these people who can't compete fairly using free speech and open markets and open platforms. They have to control, they have to censor, they have to delete and tax and destroy. And so thank God that we are able to still do this. I will keep doing it until they kill me. Whatever. I printed off flyers and handed them around town, before I had social media accounts. I would just write it up and put it on people's car windshields. I don't care. Whatever God lets me reach, I will try to use that. I'm on TNT Radio, which is this really nice free speech talk radio station, 24-hour online talk radio. If you guys check out tntradio.live and you go to the Hrvoje Morić show, I'm a weekly guest on the Hrvoje Morić show. And I talk about all sorts of... I was on there just today for an hour. And I'm on there every week, and I try to reach whatever I can reach. So what are they going to do? They can't stop us. If they ban us, I already made a Clapper account. if I get banned off of here or if something happens, yes, I will lose many followers. But honestly, there's so little engagement here because of the shadow banning and the way the algorithms work. I may as well have 50 followers. It's not a big deal to me. And whatever God throws my way, it doesn't change the mission. The mission stays the same. So there's no point in complaining. If he gives you a lot, do a lot. If he gives you a little, do a little. It says right here in the first verses of Luke chapter 21, the poor widow put in 2 coins into the coffer. And Jesus said, I tell you, this woman has put in more than all the others, for they all contributed to God out of their surplus. But she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on. So God knows that if you don't, he didn't give you much, but if you still use it, you get blessed for that. And you better watch out if he gives you a lot, because you're going to be expected to do a lot. So it's very important to make use of whatever God gave you and realize that God will reward you for it. And it might not be online. It might not be a social media thing at all. It might have nothing to do with writing or content creation. That's a whole separate avenue for serving the kingdom. That's just one. That's what I do. I write books and I make videos if I can, and I do podcasts and stuff because I like making content, and God has blessed me with being able to do that. Your own personal life, your family members, your friends, your coworkers, your whatever you do, business you run or you work for somebody or whatever it is, there's all sorts of other things that people can do in their own way. Sometimes it's an opportunity that comes up. Giving money to the temple is what they did back here. But serving the kingdom is not Jesus actually says that a time is coming when they will not worship in the temple. They will worship in spirit and in truth everywhere around the world. So it's not about giving money anymore. It's about spiritual giving, spiritual worth, spiritual value. What kind of value do you give to the world spiritually? What are you leading people towards? Or if you are a leader at all, or what do you support? Not everybody is a leader. If you're a supporter, what do you support? That's, again, it ties back into the reason why the icon of this channel is the salt shaker is because Jesus said that we are the salt of the earth. But if we don't have saltiness, we're worth nothing. We're actually so useless that we just get thrown on the ground and stepped on. Max and Turnip Farming sending the salt shakers is because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about giving whatever you can. Just being salty in your normal daily life is serving God. And if you understand what we mean by that, that means bringing out the flavor, bringing out the real meaning of the text of the Bible. Loving the Bible, considering it more deeply, and applying the morality, the lessons. There's so much you could spend your entire lifetime applying the Bible. And that's what it means to be the salt of the earth. You become something God wants to spread around. The world is all flavorless to God unless a Christian is doing something with it. That's one way of thinking about it. I don't know if that's literally true. I'm not trying to speak for God, but think about it that way. If we're the salt of the earth and God wants to have some flavor, he's going to spread around the salt where things are bland and nothing's happening, and a Christian comes in and suddenly it's interesting to God. Suddenly it's, hey, you know what? I want to put this guy over here because this whole area could use some more flavor. So that's all you have to be. You don't have to make videos. You don't have to write books. But who you are in your daily life, don't be ashamed of the gospel. It says right here they're going to kill you anyway. They're going to, We read about it. They're going to arrest you. Israel is trying to ban Christianity. Apparently that got shut down. Don't be surprised when it keeps happening. You're going to die anyway. What are you scared of? You're not going to avoid death. So win in the meantime. Do what you can to fight for the kingdom, because they can't stop it when you do that. They can take away everything you have. They can put you in a prison. They can torture you, kill you. Guess what? Martyr's Mirror, this book, has a record of hundreds and hundreds of years of people who already went down that path. People who already got killed for Jesus. You're not alone. Better men and women than me and you were killed in ways that I can't even describe. We have it so easy. We have so many blessings in options. For as much as the world sucks, I could get in my car and drive to a different part of the country and get a job and move around and change what I want to change in my life. We have freedom. We have the internet still. We still have the things to be so effective as Christians. And people sit around and act like their hands are tied and there's a gun to their head. No, the world is full of losers who are scared of us. The world is full of petty bullies who, if you stand up to them, run away and crap themselves. They're scared of Jesus Christ. They're scared of the truth. You go into the darkness as a light. The darkness runs away from the light. The Bible says that. Darkness flees from the light. And they hate the light. That's why they killed Jesus. It says in verse 4 of John chapter 1, well, in verse 3, it says, 4, it says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. If you have the light, it actually goes on for many verses about the light. It says, the true light who gives light to every man coming into the world, he was in the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to testify about the light so that everyone might believe. So that's just as light surpasses darkness, the gospel and believing in Jesus and being bold in the gospel is what we're like. But you can't be a coward. You can't cop out. You can't go halfway and try to be friends with the world. We saw in James chapter 4, it says you can't be the friend of the world and the friend of God at the same time. You're the enemy of God if you're the friend of the world. So we're on the winning team, and God has given us more time to win, and we should be doing that. And in the meantime, we can study our Bibles and glorify God. Oh, guys, my throat is pretty destroyed now from all the ranting, but please do consider, if you want to support me, consider getting Fire in the Rabbit Hole. And maybe everyone is wrong. Not because I get money from it, but because I want you to know the arguments better than I can make them here on the stream. As much as I like to do this, I'm a better writer than I am video creator and speaker. And I want you to know the arguments so that you can have more confidence. If you don't want to buy the books, listen to it for free on the podcast. the Not Done Yet podcast. My YouTube channel has an archive of these studies. If you like today's study like I did, I love this study, consider going back. You can watch them in double speed or skip around if you want to. It's nice. You can go back and listen to those. I am going to start putting this audio of this podcast on my podcast, so you can also listen to it on the podcast. All my links are in the link tree in my bio. I have to go, but I'm not going to bed, actually. I'm going to stay up and do a bunch of writing after this. But thank you, W. Hunt, for the, the well wishes. I think this was an amazing study. Luke chapter 21 has so much to offer. Obviously, the gospel has so much to offer, but we don't appreciate it until we go back into it and we let the Holy Spirit guide us. So, if you want to hear what God has to say to you, He's talking to you right now in the Bible. Go listen. That's the point. I'm all fired up now. I gotta cool off, and then I gotta start writing in my book again. I'm writing a new book that I think you guys are going to enjoy. And it's not going to be ready for quite a while. But I very much appreciate the 20,000 likes, for you guys sticking around, listening, arguing. If you argued for the flat earth and whatever, I don't hate you. I'm trying to look out for you. There's deceivers everywhere. Be very careful. And let's try to help each other to navigate this world of deception that is trying to enclose around us. And bless you. And I'm going to be not doing any more of these studies this week, but I want to come back next week on Tuesday, if God is willing, and then I will do another study. In the meantime, I'll try to get these videos uploaded sooner on the podcast, so that you can listen the audio if you want to listen to it there. So yeah, thank you for supporting me. Have a great evening, and I'll see you again next week. Go back and listen to this on YouTube if you missed anything, and I feel very lucky to have you guys here. And if this TikTok channel gets banned, or TikTok itself gets banned, I want you to remember that I now have a Clapper account. For as stupid as that platform is, it's very similar to this one, so I can do basically the same thing there. The podcast name is the Not Done Yet podcast. Not Done Yet. And it's linked in my bio, in my link tree, so you'll find it very easily if you look it up. Look it up on my link tree. You can also go to the website, wolfpox.com, and both of my books, Maybe Everyone is Wrong and Fire in the Rabbit Hole, are completely free as full audiobooks on my podcast. I don't charge anything. It's just me reading the books and explaining what I meant. So you don't have to buy them, but, now I'm going to start doing the upload of this audio from these studies there with a little bit of extra commentary at the beginning. So I hope you guys tune into the podcast too, because that's another way to keep in touch if something goes wrong. Rhoda says Casper or Clapper? Clapper. Clapper. It's, if you find the app, it's a thumbs up and a thumbs down like that. And hey, it sucks, okay? Let's be honest, it sucks. But I get traction there. I get to talk to real people, and I get to talk to you if you go there and you follow me. My name is Wolfpox on there. Who cares that it sucks? TikTok sucks. Everything that the world does sucks. But if we go there as Christians, we take it over and we become the truth that people need to hear. I'm on Twitter, and Twitter sucks. Everything on the internet sucks. So I'll go to Clapper. Who cares? And I'll use it, because when I'm there, I preach the gospel and I talk about what I believe and I fight for what I believe. It's me that makes it what it is when I'm there. I don't care what other people are doing. When I started using TikTok, It was all dance videos and people trying to make each other laugh and lip syncing. I revolutionized a lot of what was done on TikTok by having a 140-part series studying nerdy Bible stuff with a whiteboard. Nobody was doing that. Nobody had even a 3-part video back then. I made a 140-part series, and people were addicted to it. And I was using the whiteboard to try to help people understand what was going on in Revelation. As that was happening, I got 220,000 followers in the course of a couple months with Bible study, which you'd think no one would care about. And guess what? A bunch of people started to copy me. And then suddenly there was all this conspiracy theory stuff, and there was all this history stuff, and there was all these people Bible studying on TikTok more boldly. There was Christian stuff, but it was very mediocre and very mild. People started to get more bold and more confrontational and more interesting with how they were approaching the Bible suddenly in history. And so I'm not going to say I changed everything, but I was one of the people who started to talk more seriously on it about research, and it sucked. So guess what? Clapper sucks right now. But if I start using Clapper, then now suddenly Wolfpox and what Wolfpox represents is on Clapper. So suddenly it doesn't suck as much because I'm there. That's how I see it. And I see that with the whole world, honestly. I go to any situation, a workplace, a whatever, it all sucks when I get there. But the point is that by the time I leave, I want it to be more interesting. I don't even like my own family gatherings. But when I go there, I have fun, and it becomes interesting. I love my family a lot, but the gathering aspect, it's not. I'm not a social person. I'm an introvert. I don't like to expose myself and show my face and put out stuff and publish my real name and have people judge me and stuff. I don't like that. But once you get into it and you just do it, you get over it, you start to make a transformation, and you have people who respond to it, a small group of people respond to it, and then suddenly things start to improve, and you realize you're not alone, and there's other smart people out there who also care about the truth, and all these things can sort of happen. So I would say the same thing to all of you guys. Wherever you go, try to be the salt. Try to be the light that can actually change the equation of where you are. You don't have to be a loudmouth. I'm not confrontational. I mind my own business. I talk to people who are receptive. I don't confront random people or anything like that. But be interesting, have something interesting to say, and you can transform a situation. And I plan on doing that on Clapper, especially if this all gets banned or whatever. In the meantime, I do want to come back next week. Thank you for you guys supporting. I'm reading the comments here. I'm not reading the comments out loud, but there's a lot of very nice supportive comments here. I hope this next coming week, as this week goes on, you guys remember what we talked about, Luke chapter 21, the end time, the signs that are going to happen, the necessity of persecution, the necessity to, it says, this is one interesting thing to keep in mind if you want to keep something in mind. It says that once we are arrested, that will be your opportunity to serve as witnesses. It says that in verse 13. So even your persecution, even if you get arrested, use that as an opportunity. Never give up. Never stop. If you get put in prison, witness to the prisoners around you. They'll never stop me unless they kill me. And that's funny, because I'm in God's hands and not in theirs. Derek says he's on TNT Radio Weekly with Hervoye Morich. Highly recommended as well. Yeah, there's an archive you can go back and listen to. I've done it every week for months now, so there's a lot of interesting conversations I've had with Hervoye Morich. He's a very smart professor, of diplomacy, and he's just an expert on geopolitics and world events. We have very good conversations over on TNT Radio, and so you can go back and find an archive there. I'm supposed to be on William Ramsey Investigates next week as a guest, talking about Maybe Everyone Is Wrong, and that's going to be very interesting. William Ramsey Investigates is one of the top podcasts in the world. It's, you might not have heard of it, but it has a lot of engagement. It has a lot of episodes. It is also about questioning things and looking into different things. William Ramsey is very well informed, very interesting guy. I think he's a Christian too. So next week I'm supposed to be on there, and Point of No Return says I've never heard of either of these people. Hey, that's the nature of being shadow banned. William Ramsey Investigated has had many, many followers on YouTube, and he's gotten banned like 4 times already. So, you can find William Ramsey Investigates on, what is the current place he's on? Rockfin, I believe. And he's also just a podcaster, so you can find it on iTunes and all that kind of stuff. He's like within the top 1% of podcasts. But anyway, very happy if I can get to be on there again. I was on there recently to be talk about Fire in the Rabbit Hole, and we got into all sorts of interesting stuff about Fire in the Rabbit Hole and all the New Age false truth movement. I get to be on there next week, I hope. So there's a lot of places you guys can find some of my stuff and support me. I like to try to support other people. I don't just want to be the only guy, in the room talking. So anyway, I'm going to duck out of here, going to start writing more in my book. Looking forward to that tonight. And all of your blessings and prayers and well wishes. I also wish for you. Have a good week. Don't be afraid, no matter what crazy stuff happens. Prophecy will come true, and we are on the winning side. Thank you guys on YouTube for tuning in as well. I'm about to head out. See you again next week.